the Can't Stop the Growth podcast invested as our exclusive sponsor for the 2023 PeopleForward Impact Awards. Wow, we are grateful. If you want to experience a B2B podcast that is both impacting internal employee growth and advancing leader listeners across the globe, this show is it. We know we can't stop the growth of this show. It will soon be the #1 podcast in the home services category. Thank you to the host and 2022 PFN Award winner, Chad Peterman. The wait is over. The 2023 PeopleForward Impact Awards are here, and you get the best of the best podcast hosts, Rachel Downey, founder of Share Your Genius, leading this conversation. The podcast GOAT and 2023 award winner coming right up.
And the winner is Marcia Barnes. Marcia is the CEO and founder of Valve and Media Performance Marketing, host of the podcast, and author of Here We Grow. I'm Rachel Downey, joining for a special series presented by the PeopleForward Network, where we celebrate the 2023 winners of the PeopleForward Network Impact Awards. And the person who nominated Marcia is Nikki Llewellyn Gregory, who is the founder of the PeopleForward Network. She describes Marcia as authentic. Here's what else she had to say. Marcia is incredible at relationship building. She is constantly depositing into the lives of others. Marcia is driven by her core value of love and represents her faith in community in such an admirable way. Marcia brings joy to people. She is hilarious and she is incredibly helpful. Her memory is amazing. She is a constant connector of people and resources. She speaks truth, and that truth helps people advance. Marcia Barnes is a mentor, friend, and blessing in my life and in the lives of so many. Marcia, hearing that, how does that feel?
Well, if you're going to be thought of for anything, let it be thought of that you were a lover, right?
Let's lean into that, like this idea of love. I think it's really kind of countercultural when we think about leadership and how we show up as leaders in the organizations that we have the opportunity to lead or the teams that we lead. How has love, or why has love been such a critical component for the way that you show up?
You know, I think we restrict ourselves so much on our capacity to love. Rachel, you have more than one child. So I'll ask you if you remember this moment that you find out you're having a second child. And it's almost like there's this fear that starts to mount up, or for me there was, on how will I ever love a second child as much as I do this first one? Did you have that happen?
Yeah, I really did. I remember it viscerally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the baby comes and this whole other part of your heart opens up that isn't more and isn't less than your love for your first child. I think in that process, I learned that we have an unlimited capacity to love. Just opening our hearts to new relationships and new things that we're being called to and what the possibilities are is immense. And so I go back to the biblical underpinnings of Christ gave us 2 commandments. Love the Lord with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, and love others as you love yourself. And there's a lot, and that's a commandment. It's not part of a 12-step program, and it's not a recommended process. It's a commandment, right? So in this piece about loving others as you love yourself, there's a first step in that is loving yourself. So being able to accept who you are and be inspired by the way that you've been created and what you're called to do is part of being whole and loving others. And I would submit that until you love yourself in a healthy way, you probably aren't going to be capable of loving others as well as you could. And for me, that's been a lifelong track of developing those pieces together. And as a result, I get to enjoy a lot of great experiences and relationships of helping others and watching them thrive and others helping me. And I just find it to be a good ground rule of life is to love others like you love yourself.
When did you grasp that and articulate that in your own leadership journey?
I think at first it was popular when I was coming into leadership or into the acceleration of my career. It was a popular season to talk about servant leadership. But then when I went back to that biblical direction of loving others as you love yourself, and then I looked at Christ describing himself as the Son of Man has not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. that the example that Christ set forward was to serve others. And so developing the desire to serve seems to me to have its root in love, that when I'm loving others well, I get a desire to serve. And so that servant leadership piece for me had to back up a step and say, love comes first. And if I love and serve people well, they give me permission to lead them. And when I have someone's permission to lead them, that's where we get transformational results. And I found that to be true in parenting and in friendships and in business and with clients and employees, that if I follow that trajectory of I'm here to love you, which gives me a desire to serve you, at some point, I don't expect it or demand it to get permission to lead, but at some point they give me permission to lead. And that's where the transformation can start.
So thinking about like the people who are listening to this, they're either up and on their way to maybe being in a leadership role for the first time, or they're already leading a team, either as a CEO, a president, or even an HR manager with a team, et cetera. How do you know when you've gotten the permission to lead?
Sometimes you just know, right? It's not something where they sign off on something and say, okay, lead me. But you take my executive assistant, Jen Gavin, just a beautiful, beautiful person. And in Jen's job, I lead her, but she manages me, right? So I've given her that permission to do that. And because of it, she's empowered to get transformational results. Like she can face mask me and say, Marcia, you got to get this thing down, and shepherd me along to all of the different meetings that I have through a day and make sure that I'm getting what I need to stay rested and energized. And I don't think that my results as a CEO or a community member are going to be anywhere near what they would have been without her. It wasn't like something that I signed off on for her to do that. It was a directional thing that I gave her, but I also submitted to her leadership in that. When you're talking about giving permission to lead, and you look at your business and my business and the work that we've been doing together, you're a professional at podcast promotions. And so when I hire you, I know you love me and I know you want to get results for me. I know you're crazy craving getting results for me. And so it's easy for me to see you loving and serving me and give you permission to lead me. And I've just followed every step that you've told me to take in these podcasts instead of the ones that I plan, right? I mean, I just listen to you and give you permission to get me there. And we have this great podcast going. And I'm actually meeting with a group of female leaders this afternoon to discuss the first few episodes that they've listened to, and they're going to give feedback on what they've learned from them. So I appreciate you leading me.
That is really cool. How did that happen?
The women?
Yeah.
We do this Wine and Women every other Tuesday night here at Valve and Meter. And tonight they decide what they want to discuss on content. So as a group, they decided that they wanted to listen to the first 4 episodes of the podcast and share what they're learning from that.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
So I think at the base of every healthy, productive relationship is just an admission of what your role is. That can seem a little risky. You got to kind of approach relationships not from a scarcity mentality of what could go wrong or how you might not get what you need out of a relationship. But if you put the other person first, it seems to me like it works itself out.
You're winning this award as a people-forward, people-first leader. Who was the example for you in your career?
I actually wrote about this in my book, Here We Grow. My father was a servant leader, so he was more about inviting you into the work on the farm and teaching you the why behind what the things are that you're doing and encouraging you and course correcting when you needed to do something differently. But for him, he loved the work and he served his family in a very big way. He worked full-time at Sigram's and full-time farming and loved the work. My mother loved being a boss. And those are 2 very different desires. If you love to boss, there's not much of a servant leader in you. And so you don't get that permission to lead and the ability to get transformational results. And I just, as an adult, started to think back through what I was feeling inside when I was working with my dad versus working with my mom, and knowing that I wanted people to see me the way that I experienced my dad and not my mom. I didn't want to be the boss. I wanted to be serving others. And even as my development took place, there was probably about 10 years where I was reading 50 books a year, but not to get smarter. I was reading to serve better. A lot of times what I was choosing to read was thinking of a team member and something that they were struggling with and finding a book that might help them with that, reading it myself to see if I thought it was worth their investment in reading it, and then passing it on to them. But I've never tried to get better at something just to get more for myself. I've always just thought, here's what I need to do in order to serve these communities in the best way.
Outside of the example of your mom, obviously, did you ever have like an experience where you saw the impact of not being a servant leader, like whether it was somebody who was leading you or even in your own journey of you having to call yourself out?
Often, and I've led some pretty big organizations. So when you have a team of 2,000 or 3,000 people, you're going to have some managers who are managing at the same level, the same things. So you have some ways that you can compare folks to one another. And we would hire managers from outside the business. Now, the business had part of its core values was to love others, to serve others. And we would hire folks from outside who had not been brought up in an environment of servant leadership, who would hit the ground with that attitude of being the boss. And then you would watch somebody internally who had gotten the job because they'd shown the characteristics of the servant leader, and you maybe have those two starting at about the same time. That person who's trying to show up and be the boss is pretty much going to get squeezed out of an organization that knows that that's not the right attitude of a leader. So that could be a pretty profound result. I just think one of the things that saddens me is when I have new leaders and new team members coming across my desk, whether we're going to employ them here at Valve and Meter or if I'm trying to help them find some footing. But I do notice a pattern these last several years where people will show up new to their job, and after being hired, one of the first questions that they have is, when can I be someone else's boss? And that question saddens me because I think it's got the wrong motivation. I think you want to achieve mastery over the work that you've been hired to do. Doing that well will cause you to be asked to lead others. If I take my Defender's journey as an example, they were my client to start with, and then we merged the businesses together. I was the director of marketing. Then I became the VP of sales and marketing. Then I became the CMO, then the president, and then the CEO. I never asked for a promotion or got one job and thought this is my next step. I never planned that at all. I never asked for it. I always had to be asked to do it. All I focused on was being best in the world at the work that was in front of me. And if I did that well, I knew that the path would work its way out.
How did you know that?
Well, it just makes sense. If you're getting better results than anyone else on the team, if you're getting the right things done and creating abundance, they don't have any choice but to put you in that next position.
Why do you think that, maybe this is like a too general of a thing to say, so you can edit me, but like, why do you think that there's almost like a potentially like a shift from people asking, when do I get to be a boss, versus almost like doing what you did, which was I'm just mastering the craft and then moving up because I essentially have earned it?
Well, and I probably discounted in my previous answer, it wasn't just about master the results of the current job, but also continue developing myself as a leader, right? So I'm reading, I'm going to coursework, I'm joining peer groups, I'm trying to manage my capabilities as well. So it's a combination of getting results and preparing yourself for a bigger role. I think it's a mindset thing. I think it's a mindset thing that people view success as being a boss or how many people report to them. I know when I was younger, coming up in my career, it was definitely something that you measured your success by title and head count that reported to you. I can remember being at many a dinner party or event and people trying to carry on a conversation, and basically within 2 minutes, somebody's telling me their title, how many people report to them, and what their next job is going to be. For those folks at that period in time, that was important. I don't know that I hear that as much today. It might be the circles I move in. Maybe that's still a thing, but what is the measure of success today? Is it money? Is it things? Is it title? Is it accomplishments? At the end of the day, it's probably how much happiness and how much did you help others that was created around you and through you, you know?
How would you encourage somebody who might be stuck in the, I always think of it as like the grocery list of accomplishments mindset versus like how you described it? How would you encourage them to take that shift?
You know, I'm a member of Truth at Work. So Truth at Work organizes business people into roundtables. to equip, empower, and engage business owners and leaders to reflect God's character in the marketplace and in their businesses. And so I've been in a Truth at Work group for like 15 years. And I would say maybe 12 years ago, the co-founder of Truth at Work, Ray Hilbert, he did some teaching on a concept of if you had nothing to lose, nothing to prove, nothing to fear, or nothing to hide, how would you act? And I think that hit me pretty hard at that point in my life. I think I was kind of going through some growth transitions myself. But if you can let go of those four things, it gives you a lot of freedom to be courageous, to move forward on actions and decisions that you might not have ever made. Think about it: nothing to lose, nothing to prove, nothing to fear, and nothing to hide. That becomes the true, authentic self, right? It's just you are who you are.
Yeah, I really like that. I think what's interesting is I would imagine there's like a scenario where at different times of your life, one of those hits you differently. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think that's really special. How long have you carried that since you joined 15 years ago?
It's got to be somewhere in that 12 to 15 year range. And if I look at probably closer to 15, there was a season I went through where I was hiding some things about myself that I didn't openly share the way I do today, things I'd written about in the book, because I was afraid people would judge me. And one day I was walking by one of our leaders at Defenders, and he's just shaking his head about a personnel problem he's having. And it involves somebody not showing up for work and getting in trouble with the law and blah, 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 blah. And the guy says, people never change. And I said, I don't know if I agree with that, because I know a woman who lost her business, lost her car, lost her babysitter, her phones were her business, lost her phone service, found out she had a child with a disability, and on the same day, right? And everything was taken from her, which caused her to need to go on things like food stamps, which was this person's issue, was they were on some government assistance and always struggling with their life. But my situation caused me to have an experience with food stamps and to get down to the bottom of the barrel, right? And I told him, I go, that woman was me. And today here I am in a whole different space. And he, the guy's like moved to tears about this. And he said, Marcia, we have our annual convention coming up. You need to share that story. And I said, Eric, I don't think I can. I don't think I can stand on a stage and share that. I might actually even be looked at differently as a leader if people knew that I had been on food stamps. And he said, well, you do what you want, but I think it's important that you share that. And, I did share that at his encouragement. And that was a really pivotal moment for me in leadership, to see how many other people were helped by knowing that I was a walking case of being someone who had totally reinvented their life and succeeded. If I can do it, so can you type of model. I'm really glad I had that experience. I would have never had it if I hadn't been hiding something that Eric encouraged me to not hide. I was hiding it. I was afraid I would lose something. I was afraid, right? I was trying to do all those things. But bringing that into the light helped so many others that I just chose at that point, don't ever be anything but transparent and authentic.
Why did you decide to speak up in that moment?
Because he was judging a person that they would never be able to be anything else but these mistakes they were making. And I knew that wasn't true.
More often than not, when we're in a situation where maybe we have an experience that we don't feel super proud of or whatever, we do hide. We don't actually speak up. But in that moment, you chose to speak up. Were you just kind of fed up, or was there something else going on?
No, it was more of I wasn't upset with Eric, and I wasn't angry about the situation. It was more of here's another way to look at that. Because so many people have helped me through the years, including in that one bad day, that I had, that I write about in the book, that if we don't get on the side of helping people, and I don't mean falsely propping them up, I mean truly believing in them and encouraging them and helping them to find their way. If we're not those advocates for other people, then what's the grace that we've been given will be taken away, I'm pretty sure, in the balance of things. So people showed me a lot of grace. A lot of people tried to help me. Really, anything that I'm doing that's helpful to other people is simply paying back for loads of people that poured into me.
I think it's a good segue really to ask you the question of, how would you describe a people forward leader?
I thought Dave Lindsay was a good model and the way that he led at Defenders when there was a crisis and we needed to make change. And we would make these plans and these strategies and these elaborate Gantt charts, and stuff of how we were going to correct the situation. And before Dave before he would give a blessing to a path forward or say, okay, go execute that, he would always ask the question, what does this do to our people? And oftentimes that meant there was an adjustment in a plan that was going to need to be made because it was unduly heavy on the people part of its result. And I always thought that was a very good practice that I don't know that I've seen a lot of other business leaders do that as easily as he did. And I don't even know that he's aware of how forefront that was in his thinking back in those days too. It's been 20 years since we started working together, over 20 years since we started working together. And that was one of the first things I noticed about his style of leadership was always, before they made a major business change, asking the question, what does this do to our people?
I think that's a really good reminder, especially as people are thinking about end of year planning and what's happening next year and where do we go. Framing it that way, I think, is really helpful. At least it is for me. I have a tendency to not have as much empathy or foresight into that impact as I would like. So that's an area of improvement for me, for sure.
I don't always get this right. I get complimented a lot about this type of leadership that I exhibit, but I don't get it right all the time. And man, when I really miss it, it's disastrous, because if you're known as somebody who thinks of people and loves people and serves them, when you don't get it right, it hurts folks much more easily than if you're an asshole all the time. So in my opinion, I've gotten into conversations before. I have a person that was on my team, on the management team, and we had an argument, and I made a comment that as soon as it was out of my mouth, I was like, what the hell are you doing? It was a hurtful, damaging comment. I apologized immediately, but the damage was done. And within 4 weeks, that woman was in another job. The good news is she was gone 2 years and came back and is on our team today. And I'm very thankful for that. But I messed that one up.
So if you do mess it up, I mean, obviously you said you immediately apologize, but is there anything else that you would recommend? Because again, the people listening to this, they want to be a people forward leader, but we are humans. And so even if we try and do our best, we will inevitably fail at one point or another. What would you recommend people do?
Well, apologies are great and asking for forgiveness is great, but in most cases, that also requires some sort of action behind it. And there was an action I needed to take behind it that I lagged on for a few days and ran out of time. So she was already on a journey to find another job before I could get the solution back in front of her. When you do make a mistake, words are great, get them out quickly and mean them, but whatever action behind that that's needed to correct the scenario, it's got to be your number one thing to get done.
I want to also just take one moment to talk about your book and your podcast and just give an opportunity for people to continue to learn from you. One of the things that I've personally loved about the book is the ability to practice exactly what you are talking about. And I think that connects really nicely to what you're talking about there as a leader. It's you can say it, but then you have to back it up with specific action when you say you're going to do it. And so that's one of the things that I love about your book. And one of the things I love about your podcast is just the fact that it brings all of those things back to life ongoing. I'm curious, for people listening, and I know you're not a self-promo person, so I am setting you up, but what do you hope people take away from the content you're putting out there?
You're right. I'm not someone to just try to get out there and self-promote, but I will say that this book has been out since May, and I have tangible examples of lives that's changing in monetary ways, in their leadership capability ways, and even in healing relationships and reminding them of how God sees them, right? Just last week, I got an email from a businessman here in Indianapolis who's at a pretty large business, and it's having some troubles with one of its marketing partners that's setting it back a lot. And he sent me this very lengthy email about, he remembered that he had the book in his backpack on his flight home and started reading it, and how it really touched him to the book to remind him of God's purpose for his life, and that the problems he was having in business were small compared to the opportunities he had to serve. his customers, his team members, and the community. And he physically writes in there, "This changed my life." So I would encourage people to read it and let's see how it works on you. I think it's hitting a lot of different chords for different people, but I would say it's worth the read as a story that can help you.
What did I not ask you that you would love to talk about?
You were asking me about serving others and how you know to do that or think about it. I did have a recent experience with my family. I've got two sisters, and last year I turned 60, and I took my sisters and their families on a little weekend trip, and we said we had just a fantastic time. And this year was my sister Julie's birthday. She was turning 60. And Julie's not had as easy of a path in life as other people have. Certainly not the path that I've taken. Life's been hard for her. She works very, very hard. But love and romance and success and jobs and business has not been part of her journey. And so I decided to have the same party for her at her 60th birthday that we had for me. When I was waiting for the party to start and she and my other sister Nancy and I were sitting together, I asked her, "Julie, when's the last time someone gave you a birthday party?" And she goes, "I think it was when I had my sweet 16 and you gave me my sweet 16 birthday." And I thought, man, how has she been overlooked for all those years? For 44 years, no one has said or made an effort to be kind to her, to show her a party, right? And I think we got to look around our world for those people. That's my sister, and I didn't even notice that was happening. So look around and see who you can drop some joy on and remind them that they're valuable to you.
I just had goosebumps.
It was a lovely week. I flew her. Her son's in the military. She sees him once every year or two. She has a grandson. That's his son. And they divorced, so she never sees her grandson. We flew Christopher in and the grandson, James, and surprised her.
Oh my gosh.
It was gorgeous. Just beautiful. That's not a cheap thing to take your whole family on a little vacation weekend, but boy, was it rich in the results of the investment.
Well, I just think that's such an important reminder, even for myself, it's you get so caught up in all the things you have going on and all of the responsibilities you have and all of the commitments you've made and all this kind of stuff. And all of them are important and worthy, right? But at the end of the day, it's how can we find those opportunities to pour into others, even just a note, or just an "I see you,"
Right.
And
A
I think that's
random
really
phone
special.
call, yeah.
Just love having the opportunity to learn from you as always and share your wisdom to the people that are going to listen to this. And it has been an honor to interview you as part of this. You are more than deserving. And the reason you are more than deserving is because you are humble and you are authentic and you're just generous with your time and your resources. And so thank you so much. For anyone listening, I would highly encourage you to get her book, Here We Grow, and listen to the podcast, Here We Grow, as you are on your own growth journey for your business and yourself as a leader and human. Thank you for listening to this episode featuring the PeopleForward Network Impact Awards. Feel free to subscribe or hit that follow button wherever you listen to podcasts so that you can learn more from these PeopleForward leaders.